Hey everybody, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools Spotlight Edition, where we showcase individuals and businesses doing great things in the community. And today we're going to discuss a not so well-known area of the construction field, landscape architecture. And we're going to do that with the help of an expert by the name of Vincent Agoe. So stick around and we'll see you guys right after this.
Hi, I'm Vincent Agoe. I'm a landscape designer. Graduated from Berkeley in 2018 with a master's in city planning, master's in landscape architecture, and that's kind of how I got into the field. Yeah, so like I mentioned, my background is in urban planning and urban design, and basically I got into this field because I grew up in Ghana, and what that really did for me as a kid was that I grew up in a city, right, where for me, most parts, it was very dense. I was born in Accra, and if you don't know anything about Accra, you should check it out. It was super dense. And what I did as a kid was I grew up, well, not just grew up, but I played outside, right? So urban design and urban planning was something that was always built into me. It was always built into my nature. And when I first moved here, one of the things I loved was public spaces, right? In Ghana, you just play wherever you want to play, but in the United States, you have parks, you have plazas, you have the beach, you have the forest, you have whatever you need, right? And so when I went to school, one of the things I wanted to really understand was, well, how do we create these spaces, right? It's not just policy, but somebody goes out there, somebody designs these spaces, right? And so the first thing I tried to do was, well, how do I get in this field, right? I asked myself this question: how do I get in this field? Urban planning, urban studies is actually what I did as my major, and I graduated in 2013 as an undergrad. But that wasn't enough for me to just go and craft policy. You know, I grew up in Inglewood. We're in Inglewood right now. And one thing I started noticing growing up in LA was that you have I'm gonna say rich neighborhoods, right, that have all of these beautiful trees, these beautiful like spaces, and you go in there, you just kick it, and you just have fun. But for me, growing up in Inglewood, I was like, well, why can't we all have the same thing, right? And so my way that I started getting to urban design and urban planning and really landscape design is that it's not just about creating beautiful spaces, right? When I say beautiful spaces, you're probably thinking like, well, yeah, you're probably one of those people that designs those spaces that people gentrify, right? And for me, it was my core is that I love people and love public spaces. And I really wanted to learn the design aspect, also how to transform that into creating spaces that keep low income neighborhoods in place, right? It's not about me creating a space so somebody else can come live there and be like, oh, this is a really nice space. I wanted to be at the table designing these spaces for my community. I wanted to actually make an impact, right? I didn't just want to design something for somebody else to come in and enjoy. I wanted to work with the community that I was living in and design these spaces, right? But what does that mean? It means that I got to have those tools to understand what I'm doing, right? I mean, I went to school for it, but it wasn't just about, okay, well, create a plaza or a park or a planting garden, right? It was about advocating for the communities that are there, right? So, for example, a project that I had in school, we were trying to design for anti-displacement, right? Anti-displacement being the opposite of gentrification. And some of the ideas that came up was like, well, let's do a dog park. And it's like, does your community need a dog park, right? If you're trying to keep people in place, is that what the community needs, right? And so for me, I found landscape architecture as this tool to not only create beautiful spaces, but to actually create change, right? And every single thing that I do with my work, it's all about the people. It's you know, let's talk to the people. Let's figure out if we got to do 10, 15 iterations, whatever it is, right? And so when I graduated and I really started getting into the field, or even before I graduated, I worked at the San Francisco Department of Public Works as a landscape architectural intern. And that meant community meetings all the time. And there's some people that, I'll be honest with you, do not like community meetings because sometimes they take a long time. But that's where these decisions get made. That's where you talk to people. And the good thing about that is, like I said, I grew up in Ghana. I grew up in community, right? And I realized that these spaces, if you really want to make an impact, you can't make an impact in a room with a scale, a pencil, a pen, a computer, right? You make an impact by talking to the people in that community. So for me, that's how I got into the field. That's why I'm still in the field, right? That's why I advocate as much as I can, and go out and really try to talk to people and ask. And even more so, when I'm in town, because I live in Portland now, but when I'm in town, I go and check out spaces that other people are designing, so I know what people are responding to, and how to at least take that stuff and improve it into the next kind of work that I do. So what does the state of the industry look like right now? Landscape architects are big on climate change. There's very few landscape architects I've met that are not, talking about climate change and global warming and, how it's impacting communities, right? So, I'd say like 50 years ago, we were, from what I know, right, it was more residential work, a kind of big plaza work, big park work. But now it's really about every single thing is about, there's lots and lots of different firms that are starting to pivot into thinking about sustainability, thinking about climate change. That's actually being reflected in policies that are being kind of passed within the field right now, and new metrics that are being designed to think about not just, the work that we're doing and specifying materials. I work a lot with materials, right? So, concrete, brick, metal, what else? Sand, right? Planting, all of that stuff. And so what we're starting to think about really is it locally sourced? Is it easily available? Is it drought resistant in some areas, right, where we can't get water? Even as to like how these things are being constructed, right? How do we actually design something that can make it last a long time, right? And so that's kind of where the state of the industry looks like right now. But I think it might stay this way for a while, especially with everything that we're seeing around increased flooding, increased rainfall, decreased rainfall in some areas, increased heat, longer summers, longer fire seasons and all. So that's kind of where we are right now, I'd say. So landscape architecture at its heart is a construction industry, right? So actually the first thing that happened, at least in my office, was a lot of our work stopped. Nobody was building during the pandemic because everybody was stuck indoors, right? Even people who were actually, construction workers couldn't go out because of all the different restrictions that we had. And so the pandemic has actually affected us a lot. I'm sitting outside right now, and one of the things that happened, think about 12 months ago, was there were some restrictions. You couldn't even go outside, right? That we couldn't do the work that we could do, right? And so think about last March as to now, one thing that's happened immediately is that I'm seeing some of my clients think about, well, how do we redesign public spaces, right? How do we deal with this, what people have been terming this new normal, with social distancing, with people still being able to be outside and enjoy spaces, right? And so within the field, I saw a lot of firms let go of people, saw firms try to pivot and do something else. We pivoted, not necessarily pivoted, but we added new lines of work to try to get into. And I think this pandemic has given us a lot to think about in terms of the work that landscape architects do, right? Not just creating a design, but really thinking about the clients that we work with, right? Which clients actually want to work with us. And also, much like most people who got a chance to sit at home for 14 months and think about, well, what's next in my life, right? What's the next thing for me to do? We had to do the same thing, right? We had to think about what kind of work do we want to do, right? I know in my office, we started thinking about, well, every other kind of project that we could have possibly done, right? And so two things. One, what has the pandemic done? It's caused us to rethink our values for sure. And second thing being, well, to think about what clients we're working with and how to actually design meaningful spaces that people can exist in following whenever we get back to normal, right? And what that even means, right? So that's kind of where we are right now. What is the most difficult and most rewarding part? There are lots of difficult places, parts of the profession and rewarding, but one that I'd like to point out is that much like you who were watching this video, there's just never enough money in the world, right? And so sometimes we find ourselves in positions where some of the designs that we put out, they get value engineered. And value engineering is basically when you take one piece and you substitute an equally better piece but a cheaper version, right? And so for me, sometimes that's difficult to stomach. I've only been practicing for 3 years, and so probably ask me about 10 years from now how I feel, but that's actually a difficult part, because when you get a project that's value engineered, now you have to think about replacement materials, replacement pieces, right? Even sometimes you even have to change the whole design, and that can be frustrating sometimes, for sure. But the rewarding part is, with every new iteration, you get a chance to figure out, does your design hold, right? Do those big ideas hold? Do those big concepts hold? And do you have a client who's still willing to work with you to work through those changes, right? I think for me, there's nothing more exciting on a day-to-day basis than something that is challenging, right? But sometimes it's some of the most frustrating things can also be rewarding. In my work, we've definitely been through quite a few different projects that have had to go through some substitutions, right? But each time it's just, let's just do more research, let's figure it out. And at the end of the day, landscape architecture is a construction field, and something's going to get built. Process from start to finish. The beginning really is trying to convince somebody to pay you for the work. And that is sometimes the hardest part, it's finding a client. And so sometimes we'll find a client just because there's somebody who needs work, or we'll go and pitch a project. What that means at that point is, if we get the project signed or contracted, then we start with just basic concepting, right? What is the big idea? What is the thing that you want to build? From there, we go into refining it a little bit more. We usually call it schematic design. And then there's design development, which is trying to figure out all the little pieces, right? So let's say you want to build a park. What do you need to build a park? Do you need grass? Do you not need grass? Do you need planting? Do you not need planting? Whatever it is that you need, that's where design development happens. It's figuring out, how do we build this thing, right? We all have lofty ideas, but in landscape architecture, a lofty idea is only as good as what can be built. And then the last part is construction. And construction is where your design's really tested, right? And so sometimes you'll see projects that are well designed and well constructed, well designed and badly constructed, and badly designed and badly constructed. For my colleagues out there, I'm really sorry. I just gotta let that secret out. And then so start to finish, big concept, big idea, ending, construction, right? And then really there's a little bit to the end, which is the maintenance portion, and that's really after we build a project, after everything gets done, after all the tape and everything's removed. Maintenance is where the work really begins, and that's not just for planting, but it's for materials, it's for every single thing that needs to be constructed, that needs to be maintained post the construction part. So that's the process from start to finish, really, in the field. So as I mentioned, maintenance is one of the big aspects of landscape architecture. It's not just about what we build, it's about how do you maintain it, right? And sometimes we use tools such as this boom lift right here. And what there's many things you can do with it, right? It really allows people to get up into the sky. And so I've seen it used for cherry picking, tree trimming. Sometimes arborists will use it if you can afford to rent it. I've also seen it for window washing. I've seen it to just basically it helps you get higher up. And so that's one of the tools that I've actually used in the design of some of my projects. And one of the things that it allows us to do, right, is really understand, sometimes it's a big machine, right? So how do you move it around your space? And so you also have to design for that, right? And I love it as a tool, as a machine, because there's very few things that you can get up high really quickly. A landscape architect's tools of the trade. Let's start with about 50 years ago. Pen, pencil, paper, scale bar, eraser, and maybe, I don't know, a light table. 2021, we are now in Civil 3D, which is an Autodesk product, computer-aided design that allows you to actually, what we're doing, right, is designing the real world. And so we can actually go out and design the real world. So we do that to scale. right? And so Civil 3D, AutoCAD, computer-aided design allows us to take the real world, bring it into a computer, right, and design every single line that gets built, right? What we also do as a landscape architect or a landscape architecture in the profession is design topography and model topography. And so how do you do that? Currently, we're using Rhinoceros, and I call it Rhino. And actually, a personal experience was when I was in school, I wanted to learn how to use Rhino, and it's this world that allows you to build stuff in 3 dimensions, right? If you like Minecraft, this might actually be right up your alley in learning how to, build a wall, a stair, some kind of path, all of that, and viewing it in 3 dimensions. When I was in school about 4 years ago, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then I came upon Revit, which is what architects, civil engineers, structural engineers are using to coordinate between systems, right? And so sometimes, when you get a project, even if it's a small project, you still want to be able to figure out your walls, your stairs, your windows, your doors, the electrical, plumbing, all of that stuff, right? And Revit, which is what I'm also learning right now, allows you to do every single one of those pieces coordinated between different disciplines. So when you get ready to go to construction, some general contractors just ask, give me your Revit model. They make working drawings from it, and then they build it, right? When I do my work in Rhino, I take all that work, model 3D, we make pretty pictures out of it. And sometimes we can cut contours out of it. We can, create a whole different planar surfaces out of it. We take it, we give it to our consultants, and then they take that and then they run with it. And so, tools of the trade currently right now, it's all computer based mostly. But let me remind you that we also sketch and we also draw. And a lot of the ideas, sometimes it's really a melding of the hand and the computer, right? And that's what makes the product really the best. So yeah, landscape architects tools of trade, AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit, all of these are computer programs that you can look up online on Google, and I suggest check out some of those videos. See, it might just interest you or catch your fancy. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I got into landscape architecture because that was something that spoke to my heart, right? It was something that I wanted to create beautiful spaces, and I wanted to figure out how to do that, right? But that's not the only thing out there. That was something that I chose for me. In my current work, I work with architects, civil engineers, structural engineers, irrigation specialists, planting specialists, and all of those people come together to make a project, right? It's not just about the work that I do, but I have to coordinate with every single person to make sure that the thing is successful, right? And so if you're out there thinking about, well, what can I do? One question that I started asking myself is, what do I like, right? And how do I get in there, right? How do I figure out how to actually make that positive change, right? And so, like I said, I work with people who, for them, there was like, architecture, that's my thing. I'm going to build buildings, I'm going to make that happen. So for example, it was like civil engineers, right? That's what they're going to do. Simple. It was just like, I love water and I love irrigation, and that's what I'm going to do, right? And so I definitely highly stress and recommend that, like, if you're passionate about something, 2 things: find it and it will find you, right? I went to school as a mechanical engineer. I didn't know that urban planning and urban design was what I wanted to do, and somehow here I am. So definitely explore those other options, because you never know what you'll find. So, who knows where I'm going to be 10 years from now, but I can tell you one thing. Currently, I'm working on getting my licensure. So I'm in the process of becoming a landscape architect. I'm technically a landscape designer, but working on getting that. And also, I love the work that I do, but I want to work on things that I'm very passionate about. And for me, that path is to open my own firm, to start my own practice. That is like my end goal, to be a principal in my own firm, running my own team, working on projects that have meaning to me. And that 10, 15, 20 years down the line, that's what's going to happen, right? And so it's not just about the now, it's also about the future.
Okay, you guys catch that? It's not just about the moment, it's about building in the now, because when you do that, you're building your future at the same time. So guys, if you like what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.